This conference will now be recorded.
And good afternoon, everyone. Glad you're here for this very important webinar on a very important topic that is changing our lives, it seems, with each passing day. My name is John Remsen, and joining me this afternoon is Uri Gutfreund. And between the two of us, we're going to share some thoughts, some strategies, some suggestions for firm leaders to help you get your firm, your people, your clients through these very, very challenging weeks and months ahead. A couple of housekeeping announcements, and then we'll get rolling. We're going to try to run about 45 minutes, get right to it, and cover quite a bit. We're going to share results of an online survey that many of you completed anticipating today's webinar. We have over 100 law firms weighing in on how they're dealing with this situation. And we know that lawyers, law firms love benchmarking data, so we'll give you some of that. And we are being recorded, so this session will be archived to our YouTube channel. We're going to feature it in our weekly e-newsletter that goes out Friday morning. And Uri and I were thinking we might do a follow-up to this in a couple of weeks as we get through a very challenging situation. Finally, we have put together some handout material, and we will distribute it immediately after today's webinar, and it will include our PowerPoint deck, links to resources, and a few articles and documents that Uri and others have provided that may be helpful to you and your law firm. So welcome. We're glad you're here, and let's go ahead and get started. I want to introduce my good friend and colleague, Uri Gutfreund, who's kind enough to join us this afternoon. Uri is the National Law Firm Practice Leader for Risk Strategies Company. So he's all about helping law firms manage risk, and sells insurance, business interruption insurance. A number of you have had questions about that, and he'll talk about it. Uri runs a managing partner roundtable in New York and as well in New Jersey, and is really tuned into mid-sized firms in the New York metropolitan region that seems to really have been particularly hard hit by the virus situation. We met on the speaking circuit many years ago at a conference in Toronto and became fast friends. He's on our Managing Partner Forum faculty and is kind enough to invite me to participate in his managing partner programs in New York and New Jersey. So Uri, so delighted to have you here and your willingness to share your thoughts, expertise, experiences with our audience today. We have 251 firms registered, which is absolutely incredible. We've done webinars over the years and usually get about 100, maybe 120 managing partners to participate. And this one has far exceeded our expectations. So Uri, welcome, glad you're here.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here. You know, this is, gosh, it's probably an understatement that this is certainly lifetime and life events, certainly for those who are on the call running law firms. This is your time. This is why you are leading your firms. And to the extent that John and I were able to put together today's presentation, we hope to help you through these challenging times. So as John said, I've met John a number of years ago on the speaking circuit. John is well known, head of his company, does strategic planning, marketing, business development for companies. It's really always a pleasure to collaborate with John. He is a fantastic speaker, but to distinguish, he's also quite excellent at what he does in helping firms. You know, he's not just all show. This is a guy I've learned to really respect, and I'm delighted, John, that we're able to collaborate in such short notice on this timely topic.
Well, Uri, again, thank you for being here, and we hope to impart some good practical advice and guidance to managing partners, law firm leaders as Uri says, the time is here. It's time to exercise leadership. Times of crisis. We remember FDR, and there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Well, there's plenty of fear. Many of you all are familiar with our managing partner programs. Our next conference is sold out for a couple of weeks now. It's scheduled for May 6 and 7 here in Atlanta. I sense that many people on today's call have registered for that conference. And we're very watchful as to whether or not we're going forth with it. We're kind of wait and see right now. I'd like to pull it off, but there may be a time in the coming days where we have to make a decision to postpone or cancel the conference. So stay tuned on that. We got about 120 managing partners signed up. As well, we offer a listserv to participants in our program, and boy, has that forum been active the past week to 10 days, with managing partners sharing how their firms are responding to this situation. As well, we run these monthly conference calls for the breakout groups, about 18, 20 managing partners or so, and Uri co-moderates those with us, and been a lot of conversation within those groups as well, how their firms are responding to this crisis. We try to create a bunch of resources on our website to help managing partners. And if you go to managingpartnerforum.org and look under planning, other resources, you'll see some things we put on this topic. So we're here to help, and hopefully we're able to accomplish some of that this afternoon. Today's webinar, again, if you're just joining, please put your phones on mute. We try to control that on our end, but it doesn't always work like it's supposed to. But if you would, make sure you do that as you log on. We're going to talk a little bit about the moral and ethical responsibility for law firms to deal with this in a proactive, planned, deliberate way. You have a responsibility to care for your people, your clients, your communities. We'll talk a little bit about the pushback oftentimes leaders get when they try to enact change. And often that pushback comes from senior lawyers, often in their 60s, 70s, 80s. They don't like change, but we're kind of forced to change. And it's interesting that we see the pushback. Uri will talk a little bit about this from senior lawyers who are most susceptible to this disease. And the folks in their 70s and 80s are the ones really having a hard time coping with it, yet seem to be the pockets of resistance within law firms. We'll talk a little bit about culture and policy considerations you might be considering. And are these short-term or longer-term policy considerations? Will this have a long-term impact on your firm culture and that flex time and work at home arrangement that many people, particularly young people, are looking for? We'll talk about the importance of taking care of your people, your clients, and conclude with some practical advice to law firm leaders to help you be more effective in guiding your firms, your clients through this. We've also, at the end, have a page with a bunch of links to resources that hopefully will be helpful to you. The concept of servant leadership brought to us by Robert Greenleaf. One of the primary responsibilities of a leader is to serve your followers, the people who work for you. Hear from our Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Leadership, ethics, responsibility begins at the top of the organization, and it's up to you all to set an example. And here's Warren Buffett. What you do today and in the coming weeks will be remembered for many, many years, if not generations. And I was watching a news show this morning talking about our presidents of the United States and who really steps up to challenging times. And Washington, Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy seemed to top the list. And it also talked about presidents who didn't do such good jobs in times of crisis. I won't mention those names, but some of them are fairly current. I think you as a firm leader have a moral and ethical responsibility to get ahead of this, to take that leadership stance, to stand up to the pushback you may be getting from lawyers and others within your firm, to take good care of your people, your clients, and your firm. If you've heard me speak, you've come to our managing partner conferences, you've heard Larry Richard, a psychologist, he talks about lawyer resistance to change. Well, at this point, we got no choice. We have to deal with this. In many cases, it's a life and death situation. Lawyers don't cope well with change. Larry brings to us these characteristics of the lawyer personality through decades of research. Love the autonomy. No one's going to tell me where I can work and how I can work. And the people within my department are coming in the office. I don't care what the rest of the firm is doing. Is that okay? I don't think so. Lawyers are skeptical, don't like change, tough group to lead. Here's our friends at Altman Wiles suggesting that partners are impediment to change. But we've got to respond to this and do things in a very different way. Uri's going to speak to this a little bit and some of the things he's seen in recent weeks. New York, New Jersey. Is your firm, are your lawyers prepared to do things differently? And Uri, why don't you speak to this slide?
Sure. I mean, when John and I were talking about how to express this, we have to put in context that this data of partner being open to change, partners being open to differences, this is not the radical times we are in now. This is the data from the past few years when we were seemingly talking about what seemed like big decisions. This was tweaking the compensation program or changing the size of offices on this trend of more standard offices. And so keeping this information going into today's challenges, this is enormous. What we're seeing now, and as John alluded to, we're in New York City, New York region. Our firms are a little bit ahead, unfortunately, with dealing with the what is becoming apparently a shutdown of most offices, and a little surprising because, as John alluded to, the people who are most at risk are really our senior partners, and the senior partners yet seem to be, at least from the dozens of firms that have been in touch with us this week, they seem to be the ones who are most adamant of, we need to keep the office open, no need to do that, and unfortunately, it's very scary. And so I think part of that understanding is, I think, this background to the way these lawyers in general, but the senior partners, they're just not open to change, and we have to help them, and we have to do change now. I think we'll talk at the end as what firms are doing right now. To a certain extent, a lot of changes we've been seeing just in a very short week or 2 weeks now has been an acceleration of what we see as a trend. But this time it's not a partnership vote about flex time. It's a lot of our firm is working remotely. How do we monitor their time? How do we do that? So this embracing change and lack of doing it is a real problem, and it's the background to the challenge that you, ladies and gentlemen, have before you today.
And as we layer on top of this, this is some disturbing stuff, and lawyers, have a hard time coping with all the pressures and changes. And this is self-reported data from 44,000 members of the ABA. And as people, go home and isolate, these issues might amplify somewhat. So I just think it underscores the importance of calming the ship and letting your folks know we got a plan. It's often the uncertainty that creates so much of our anxiety. And as a leader, helping deal with that uncertainty and letting your folks know we do have a plan. We're going to get through this together. Time to step up and lead and rally the troops. Uri, I'm going to give this stuff to you and talk a little bit about what firms are doing, what firms should be doing as we get through these times. And as we go through these bullet points, we're going to show you some of the survey data that you guys provided us in terms of offices opening and how far out firms are looking as they make decisions on office closures and investments in laptops for everybody and setting up people to work remotely. So Uri, why don't you walk us through some of this stuff, please?
Sure, John. I mean, we call this the no-brainer stuff. I mean, it's unfortunately not entirely accurate. I mean, there is brain and more challenging. It's changing all the time. The CDC guidelines obviously have been helpful to a certain extent, although they change very quickly. It is important that you keep up to date on some of this information. And again, some of this is obvious. The social distancing that is going around the country is becoming the norm. Most firms in the East Coast are going or have already gotten to that point. You're looking out for the health of your people. And we'll talk about that a little later, how the message for your firm, and that's the reason why you're going to be up to date on this, is you are taking care of your people. You are taking care of your people, and they're going to remember that. Will people keep their offices open? I know, John, we did the poll on this. So a good amount of people are still business as usual, or lawyers still working from home. Roughly, when we looked at this, about half the firms are still leaving it up to people, or business as usual. I think that for those of you on this call that are in that half, I hope what you'll take today from what we talk about is the importance of thinking this through. And particularly if you're open now is the time to plan for the possibility, maybe even the probability that you will be closing. Some of the firms that we saw in the Northeast were a little bit ahead. So some firms had a practice day last week, which worked out well because they were able to work out the kinks. And don't fool yourself, whatever planning you do, there will be kinks. But now, if you are open, is the perfect time to make a plan, communicate that plan, and test that plan. It's something new, but this is a likely future. And I think the prudent firms that do that won't be as shocked, and they'll be able to come up with a strategy. You know, so many of your folks want a strategy. John, next slide.
Let me just comment here. You know, what's interesting, I just came from a client where the lawyers have laptops and the ability to work remotely. The support staff does not. And I have a client in particular who's accelerating the purchase of laptop computers for all of its support staff, so they too can work remotely. And installing those laptops and setting them up in their offices and training them, the training piece, we can buy all this technology and remote working ability, but training people to work at home and remain productive is important as well. You can see here 21% of firms on this call are closed. Everybody's working from home. Under that other category, firms talk about skeleton crews, or some offices open, others not. But I think it's time to consider closing your offices, getting ahead of things. And the coast seems to be a bit ahead of the central parts of the country and the smaller markets. But I think it's inevitable, and the right thing to do at this point in time is to close down the shop and encourage people to work from home. Uri, here we are back to our bullet points.
Yeah.
You and I talked a little bit about the importance of handling the money in the mail.
Yep. Well, John, I just want to touch on two more things first. You know, so many of the planning sessions that we run at John's session and other venues are about the firm culture. Now, most of your firms, if we ask you why people stay at your firm, they say the firm culture. We are, and I can see you all virtually nodding your heads. It's our collegial environment, our relationships. We're a family, we're a team. And that really is true, because in today's market, you know that your lawyers have opportunities, your partners, your associate in other places. So why do they stay at your firm? And the answer always, well, sometimes it's money, but usually it's not. It's usually your firm culture. And I think the challenge that the leadership, you with your leadership team will be, which is how can we create a firm culture when we're not sitting in the same place? Some of that you won't be able to do this week. I mean, obviously everybody is scrambling. We're still in very much scramble mode, but that is something next week to be thinking of, or even to be scheduling time in these harried frenzy of activity that you're doing just to keep everything open. You're gonna need to schedule time, plan out that firm culture. What are we? Maybe we need tools. One of the things that John and I were talking, some firms are doing is, if you were a firm that didn't schedule set meetings often, some firms have set meetings every week. Well, maybe you need to be that firm now. Maybe you need to have that Monday morning rally at 9 o'clock. Maybe you need to do it on Mondays and Wednesdays and Friday afternoon to summarize the week. That's something you certainly should consider, because creating and maintaining that firm culture when everybody is in their disparate, either social distancing in different offices but not getting together, or at their homes, which is a likely probability, how are you going to keep that culture, create that culture, and keep it going? I think that's very important.
I agree. And many firms are canceling the firm retreats up through late May. I've already had a few cancellations and canceling events. And I mean, it's the right thing to do. But it's disruptive. But as we more isolate and distance, the importance of finding ways to maintain the communication and the culture best we can. We asked a question about time frame, and I'll bet the answers to this question changed now versus 2 weeks ago. Select the answer best describing kind of the time frame you're looking at as you're making decisions. I know, 57% are looking at a 1 to 2 week time frame. Still, about 20% are going 1 day at a time. Well, that creates a lot of uncertainty when you're going 1 day at a time. And I think people want to see a longer term view as to how the firm's grappling with this stuff. And so try to look beyond today, tomorrow, next week at what we might be dealing with May 1st or July 1st. It's amazing to watch the Masters postpone, the Kentucky Derby postpone, and the March Madness canceled. These decisions were not made inconsequentially, and it speaks to the dire circumstance here. Uri, do you want me to go back to that other slide before we move on? Talk a little bit about,
please.
A lot of folks on our survey were asking about business interruption insurance, and now might be time to talk about that, because you sell business interruption insurance.
Sure, John. Yeah, sure. So yeah, you can imagine business interruption has been a topic in the insurance industry forever, and the last month been especially tested. I will tell you, our law firms are confused by it, and our law firms are obviously thinking ahead that this might be one of those types of claims where business is very much interrupted. As many of you have probably already researched, and if you haven't spoken to your brokers, there are, of course, hurdles for that. Look, what insurance policies don't have hurdles, unfortunately, but there are hurdles here as well. Each policy is really going to respond differently, and it's certainly possible that some of the firms on this call have that coverage more robustly than others. The issues that revolve around this is that the typical business interruption insurance, which I would guess most firms have, require a loss to the place of business, fire, by the usual perils, for example, fire, etc. There are other approaches and there are other languages, but bottom line, what we are telling everyone, and I don't think there's any danger to the advice I'm going to give you, which is twofold. Number one, should you ever get a claim collected under business interruption, and for those of you who have ever had a small disaster at your firm and you have gone through this process, it is a process. It's not a simple, you send a bill and they send you send a claim for a certain amount of money. The insurance companies will ask you to participate in pretty much a financial audit. Well, they will be auditing the amount of funds, the amount of money, revenue, profits you've gotten before the events and after the events. So it will be a process. Therefore, what we are recommending is that even if in the past, and this is obviously an issue that we deal with at all our firms all of the time, even if in the past it had been okay for your lawyers to put their time in on a weekly or every 2 weeks time, hopefully nobody's doing more than that anymore. We strongly recommend that you do it daily. There are obviously other benefits to requiring your staff and your lawyers in this environment to be keeping track of their time very carefully. But even and especially for this item, we recommend, number one, that you keep this time daily. Make sure you are capturing everybody's hours. And then number two, the other piece and point that recommendation on this topic is you should put in a claim. And the reason is, although the policy language in most policies, and obviously I don't know all of your policies, but most likely most of your policies do not cover the standard business interruption for this kind of a claim for the reasons I just mentioned. Even that so, insurance is made for when you have a disaster. Historically, and it's not that long ago, in 2008 and September 11th, insurance companies, aided directly and indirectly by governments, have, and we've had other regional disasters like Hurricane Sandy, which is similar as well. Insurance companies will sometimes pay for claims that are really not covered by your policy. However, if you do not put in a claim, you will absolutely not get reimbursed for it. So that is our second piece of advice, is that you should put in for a claim on business interruption. It's not clear in your policies usually, but if you don't put in a claim, you will not. And just one more comment, John, before we go on. We had mentioned the technology, and I think that the technology is critical, what people are doing. We are seeing a huge uptick, and you may have read about this in the newspapers, and I just want to raise everybody's awareness of this. Unfortunately, the bad cyber criminals have also been paying attention to all this work.
Uri?
Uri, are you there?
He was taken out by a cyber criminal.
Apparently.
Just as he was getting to my favorite topic.
I think GoToMeeting is overwhelmed today and having a hard time supporting these. Uri, are you, and everybody else suddenly can talk, even though I've muted you guys.
John, I was having issues getting into GoToMeeting earlier, and I could tell you it was definitely not on my end. So I think you're right that they're overwhelmed right now.
I think they are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Uri.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. So what I was just saying is that the cyber criminals, apologize if I'm repeating, the cyber criminals have taken note that we are working from home, and typically people both hardware is not as good as in the office, as well as people's habits, what we call cyber hygiene, is not as in snuff as well. But I strongly recommend you remind people the best kinds of system is the kind where people just log into the office and that's all they're looking at, rather than doing all this other complicated stuff. And that, of course, will keep you safer as well. So that's just my comment on the technology.
I see a lot of firms invest in technology, fail to train their people how to use it. these investments, particularly in the hardware, software, are fairly substantial, and I think should be made in the context of a longer term strategy than just getting through this coronavirus situation. And our final slide is the horse getting out of the barn. Can we ever get our people back in the office after they've been out working at home? They're set up to work at home. They've been trained to work at home, and now it's time to come back into the office. And can we bring that horse back in the barn? Here's that time frame. Anticipate, and look forward 60 days, 90 days. I want to talk a little bit about this section because I'm pretty passionate about caring about your people, your clients. And so certainly giving them that ability to work remotely and setting them up, training them, and paying for that. The studies suggest you need a dedicated workplace that will be your, quote, home office. And some people, let's face it, can't work from home. Too many distractions, can't get motivated. Just about every industry suggests that flex time leads to decreased productivity. I was sitting next to a guy on an airplane a couple of weeks ago, and he works one of these CEO roundtable type groups across industries. And he's got a managing partner of a law firm, a banker, business people, and they're kind of an advisory group to one another. And across industries, he was saying that these CEOs, mid-sized companies, have found that the stay-at-home situation leads to decreased productivity. So training your people how to be productive at home and set their regimen and have that dedicated space, because we are likely to see a decline in productivity. Morris Tabish, we just heard from, has an article on the resources page that we've highlighted. But helping your people more productive at home, and I think a little bit of training wouldn't be a bad idea. The isolation, Uri and I have talked a little bit about making sure you reach out to your people. Perhaps as managing partner, you put out a daily email to everyone, just giving them an update. And you might not have much to say, but they appreciate hearing from you. And maybe it's a video that you as a managing partner record and distribute to your people so that every morning, they hear from the firm, they know the firm's caring, doing things, got a handle on this, but reaching out and making sure we have good, healthy, open lines of communication. Bullet point 3 here, psychological wellness. Many firms prior to the coronavirus outbreak have been recognizing the importance of happy staff and associates. Happy people are loyal, they're productive, and investing in their happiness, if you will, through wellness initiatives. These are very, very well received by associates and support staff, and maybe something we might want to focus some attention toward as stress levels go up among folks in our firm. Do we provide testing for our people? Is there any way we can facilitate that? We know it's really, really hard to get tested, but if your firm is in a position to help bring testing to your people, that might relieve some anxiety. Travel policies. On our listserv, there was talk of some firms implementing a policy where if you've been overseas, you don't come bopping right back into the office after your vacation. You self-isolate for 14 days before you even think about showing up back at the office. There's one firm on the listserv that if its lawyers travel within, quote, hotspots in the US, similar policy. So if we've had a lawyer that's been out at a conference in Las Vegas, they just can't come bopping back into the office. They got to isolate for 14 days. These are interesting times. Childcare, with the schools closing, people are worried about their kids. And hang on, I lost my slide here. Sorry about that. But are we helping our folks with childcare and taking care of older family members and these sorts of things? Boy, talk about caring about your people and creating loyalty and building a culture. These sorts of things might go a long way toward helping achieve that. How long do we pay our people working at home, not being very productive? At what point do we look at layoffs, furloughs? So many firms, and I think Uri will speak to this, are trying so hard to keep their people and to pay them. But there's a point at which we've got some economics coming into play. And, are we going to see a decrease in profits per partner? Probably. Are we going to borrow money on our line of credit? I don't know that that's a wise idea, but really thinking through these vacation policies, these sick pay policies, as people work from home, and some people might get sick.
Yeah, John,
do you want to speak to this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have two comments. Number one, it is really important that you put a policy in place. And these are bizarre because I think most of the firms have policies up the gazoo, at least they thought so. And now suddenly you have new issues that you have to deal with. For example, if someone does come back from anywhere, and you could define what hotspots or what gauge you are going to use, and frequently it's a good idea to use the CDC or use a well-known policy. But what are you going to do when someone comes back? Are you going to pay them? Are you going to mandate their vacation? We had a firm deal with an employee, I think it was the end of last week, when they came back from Europe, Italy no less, and the firm said, you can't come to work for 2 weeks. And this was one of those kinds of employees who had used up all their vacation. And they said, and the employee expressed, oh, well, you're going to pay me to sit at home, right? And the firm, frankly, doesn't have a policy yet. And so they probably will be paying her. But this is a larger firm, and obviously they can't have that as a policy. So they do have to put up a policy now. So these are new policies. And the reason why you have to put a policy in place is you can be overwhelmed in the future with these economic obligations, as well as liabilities for not treating people the same. We all know how that can end up. And then my last comment on this topic is, I've had the opportunity to speak with so many firms last week, 2 weeks about this topic, and I think it's becoming apparent that as much as firms are scrambling, and that's probably the right word, really scrambling to tech up so many of the people in their office so that they can work remotely, most firms have a certain number of people. It could be 5, 10, even up to 20% of their people that are in facilities, or they're admin, or they're more office people. And the point is that there really isn't so much. They're really going to be underproductive at the home. They really can't remote in, at least at first they can't. And what I'm really impressed with, and I think we have a lot to be proud of, is the way most firms have been acting, really not to lay these people off. And I think you don't have to look far on the news to see how many companies are laying people off, because let's face it, if we're not collecting fees, we can't really afford for underproductive people, which clearly these people are. And so it's been very impressive, I think, from our standpoint. And given economics, that it seems that best case, we're all going to make a little less this year. I'm really impressed with what's been going on so far.
Yes, so far, but there may come a point, Uri, where firms cannot afford this as much as they'd like to.
No question.
We've got to be prepared to make some tough decisions, and I think now might be the time to deal with your disruptors, your toxic personalities, and your chronic underperformers. If we do have to let some people go, hopefully that doesn't happen. We'll get through this within a couple of weeks and start to come back toward our new normal. And I think we all agree there will be a new normal in the wake of this. We asked a survey question, check all that apply. If you were to have a positive test result among a staff member or attorney at your firm, what are you inclined to do? and 70% say we got to tell everybody. 34% say we also got to tell visitors to our office within the incubation period. 14 days seems to be what we're hearing. So that means clients, the mailman, the FedEx driver, the person who delivered sandwiches to the practice group meeting. Do we have an obligation to let people know that they may have been exposed? 8% say we got to keep this private. This is a HIPAA issue. Interesting. 14%, we're not quite sure how we'd handle it. Now is the time to sit down and have that sober conversation among your partners. How would we handle this? Because it just might come sooner or later. 26% of you gave sort of an other response. And I'll share with you as our handouts the unfiltered survey results we have. So I'll run a report out of SurveyMonkey. I ran these stats about 2 hours ago. And since then, I think we've had another 40 or 50 people weigh in. So I'll freshen these surveys, distribute them, and it might help your firm and you talk through with your colleagues how we might handle such a delicate situation. And do we have a policy set forth before we deal with it? And I think Uri would agree, yeah, we should talk this through. What would happen if we learned of a positive test result? Clients, I'm a marketing guy, and I think this is a great opportunity to reach out to your clients. And there's been dozens and dozens of law firms that have issued advisories and alerts, both large and small. Jim Jimerson from Jacksonville, his firm did a really nice job. Smallish firm, did a really nice job communicating to its clients and offering some guidance. If you're representing businesses and you're their de facto general counsel, I think they come to you as their trusted advisor, their lawyer, for some guidance. And so I'm all about send out advisories, send out alerts, throw together a client webinar, do the right things. And I think good things will happen if you care about your clients in addition to your people. Certainly manage client expectations, let them know the office is closed. We might not be as responsive as we normally would be. We got court closings. Let your clients know the status of their litigation. We want to get paid through this process. We got to pay our bills too. So what's your policy if you've got clients who don't pay or are slow paying? And, try not paying your insurance premium, see what happens. How aggressive are you going to be towards your clients who may be having financial problems? I think client events, you got to give thought to. Anything within the next 60 days, you may want to consider a postponement or a cancellation. The CDC was putting it, if you've got a crowd more than 50 people, you shouldn't do that. Crowds less than 50. That was on Sunday. And then on Monday, they brought it down to 10 people. Visitation policies to your office, clients coming. Many firms have pretty much shut down and are doing their client meetings virtually and, not inviting clients to come into the firm. So some things to think about. Reach out to your clients, reach out to your organizations, and offer to present a seminar to help your local business community, your clients, associations, offer those programs. I think that would be a great thing to assemble, particularly if you've got employment lawyers, and take that out and present it. And if we can't do it in person, let's do some webinars. The technology's there. I'm a sole practitioner working out of my house. This isn't the best platform, GoToMeeting, but it's better than nothing, and I think people appreciate it. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your clients and guide them through this. Uri, any comments from you on clients and how we might reach out to them in the wake of this?
Yeah, well, I just had one more comment just about collecting funds, and I should have shared it earlier. My apologies. One of the things we're seeing, and as you do your plan, and included in the resources, you'll see a business continuity plan that my firm has done, and we're including this in the follow-up materials. But obviously, one of the most important things of your firm after delivering the legal services, which I think overall your legal staff has been used to doing this in a remote or wherever I need to do it. What is going to be most different is your staff is not going to be there, and how we're going to manage the checks coming in. So the second part, the most important part of your firm, the way your continuity is how can we continue to collect our checks when they come in, and how do we get them deposited, and how do we do our accounts payable? So one of the things we're seeing a lot of firms do in a real big hurry, if they're not set up already, is to deal with how those checks come from the office into your bank. We've seen some firms have a skeleton crew. That's kind of their primary responsibility, is to make sure those checks either daily or every other day is checked from the office. We have some other firms that are forwarding it to people's homes, either a partner or a trusted employee. And then the other aspect of that is how do we then deposit that? There are banks, and a lot of firms are moving towards that for the obvious reasons with deposit scanners, either at the office or at your trusted employee's home for that exact purpose. So we are seeing that. Also, payables online. If you're paying your bills online, gosh, if you're not doing that already, now seems to be the right time to get on board for paying your payables, not having to pull out the checkbook out of your drawer at the office.
Well, and as well, if you're not taking credit cards, this should
Yes.
certainly help you with that decision, as well as client portals. Firms are starting to set up client portals where your clients can go in, take a look at their work product, interface with their lawyers, pay their bills. Clients love client portals, and it's the resistance from senior lawyers' often that we don't have client portals. Heck, if we can do our banking online, we can, refill prescriptions online and interact with our healthcare providers. I certainly think it's reasonable for lawyers to set up client portals. So that's something you might want to consider. I'm looking at the time, Uri, and we're right at our limit here. But just to quickly offer some guidance to firm leaders, I think stay up to date, stay educated, consult that CDC website. Take a look at what other firms are doing. We're going to give you some resources. I think you have that obligation on behalf of your firm, your people, to keep up to date on what's going on. Communicate. I don't think you can over communicate in these times of crisis. Clearly, one voice, frequently. I think you should be the partner in charge of crisis management. And if not you, someone at your firm, so that we're delivering a uniform messages across the firm to our people, what we're doing. It's not an office by office deal, a practice by practice group deal, but in fact, a firm communication from leadership. And once a day, I don't think that's unreasonable. Maybe at the beginning of each day, a message from managing partner that we got it, we're on it. We're responding. And it's not just from leadership to your rank and file, but creating forums so that they can interact among one another across, up, down, diagonally throughout the organization. Really keep those lines of communication open. People are anxious, and be very, very proactive and deliberate about that. Setting up a listserv. Setting up different forums, practice groups, but keep those lines of communication open so people feel connected and less isolated from the firm. Stay cool, calm, and collected. People are looking to you. And if you're freaking out and being reactionary and knee-jerk and inconsistent, that's not good. Keep a level head. look down the road 60 days, 90 days, and come up with a deliberate, proactive plan. Refer to the experts, people like Uri. You've got, health, wellness people out there to help folks, and definitely take advantage of them. And your firm wants to maintain its credibility, its reliability, and the intimacy with its people, with its clients. Don't go disappear. Now's the time to step up and open those lines of communication. Here are some of those resources we mentioned. Morris Tabish, who's on the call and part of our faculty, offers a nice article. The bottom one here, tips for working remotely. But here's some good articles. Auric, the big firm out of California, has a nice resource center. The Association of Legal Administrators has a website. They did a webinar last week on this topic. And the folks at ALA tell me they had 1,200 firm administrators, tripled their next most attended program. So people are really tuned into this, and the ALA's built a nice set of resources specific to law firms. So check those out, and the handouts we send you will have links here. You can click right through, avail yourselves to those resources. There's plenty out there when you go looking for it, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A point Uri and I had alluded to earlier is, will we ever get back to normal, or is kind of the horse out of the barn when it comes to flex time and work at home arrangements, and maybe the shrinking of our office in terms of its square footage? As more and more people work remotely, maybe we make more investment in technology and less investment in office space. So is in fact the horse out of the barn? Uri, what do you think?
I think that we're all going to learn how hard it's going to be, because it would be irresponsible not to plan for it, certainly in the short term. And of course, nobody knows, but it might be the long run. So certainly we're all going to learn how to do it in the short run. And it quite might well be the long run that it's going to change. But look, I think most people are saying it's at least 3 to 6 months till we do nothing different. That's a long time in a law firm. That's a long time. A lot can change in 3 to 6 months. So we have a lot in front of us.
Well, I can pledge to you that we will try to continue to be a resource to managing partners, firm leaders. And so through our newsletter, we are considering a follow-up webinar as things evolve, and to help folks and be a resource to you all as firm leaders, managing partners of your law firms. Uri, thank you so much for participating today. And everybody, I hope we were able to offer some help and guidance. Your firm's not alone. We run a listserv. If you've attended our managing partner conference in recent years, you're involved in our listserv. And here's a great place to communicate with other managing partners. And we've had robust conversations there as well. And Uri and I run these monthly MPI calls, and I think we're going to set up a special set of meetings next week. If you're among one of those MPI groups, where we'll open it up, people can talk among themselves, groups of 8-10 people, and really share with one another what's working, how they're dealing with the situation. So please feel free to call on either one of us. We're here to help. And thank you for being with us this afternoon. And we will see you again in the not too distant future. Uri, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, all. Have a great afternoon.